A new fence sparked a spiteful complaint from John's friendly neighbors. But their baseless attack backfired, exposing their own secret and leading to an unexpected, satisfying justice. John and Sarah Davies cherished their home in the quiet suburbs. 2 years ago, they'd found their slice of peace, and their first big project was to build a sturdy, beautiful wooden fence around the yard. It was more than just a boundary. It was a safe haven for their little ones, Emily and Tommy, and a secure space for their lively puppy, Buster. They had gone through all the proper channels, diligently checking city zoning regulations and securing every necessary permit. They even made sure to chat with their direct neighbors, Mike and Linda, who lived just behind them. Mike had seemed so friendly, offering a casual, "Let us know if you need any help." The fence itself was a success, well-built, visually appealing, and, most importantly, fully compliant with every single local ordinance. Then, less than a month after the last nail was hammered in, a formal letter arrived from the city's code enforcement department. It stated a complaint of non-compliance had been filed against their brand-new fence. John stared at the words, utterly stunned. Shock surged through him. What? This couldn't be right. They'd done everything by the book. The sheer unexpectedness and absurdity of it made it difficult to process. His mind immediately raced through everyone who could possibly have lodged such a complaint. And that's when a memory of Mike, casually observing their progress, surfaced. Could it possibly be him? But why? The thought was unsettling, leaving a bitter taste of betrayal even before any confirmation. The very next morning, the Davies' quiet street was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek, official-looking sedan, the code enforcement inspector. He was a man of precise movements and few words, polite but with an air of unyielding authority that sent a shiver down John's spine. As the inspector methodically paced the length of the new fence, his gaze meticulously scanning every plank and post, he explained the specifics of the complaint. Concerns regarding height and material. John listened, a hollow feeling growing in his gut. He knew with absolute certainty that their fence stood at regulation height and was constructed from standard, approved wood, just like nearly every other fence in the neighborhood. A heavy wave of sympathy washed over John, not just for himself, but for Sarah, for Emily and Tommy, and even for Buster, whose joyful romps in the yard felt threatened. They had poured so much more than just money into this project. They'd invested weekends, sweat, and the hopeful vision of a secure family space. The thought of being forced to tear it down or undertake costly, unnecessary alterations felt like a personal affront. It was during this conversation, as the inspector's calm voice detailed the bureaucratic process, that Mike's earlier offer of help resurfaced in John's mind. But this time, it was laced with a chilling insincerity. John distinctly recalled Mike often being in his own backyard while they built, not just waving, but standing, watching, his eyes seemingly taking in every detail. A cold, creeping suspicion began to solidify. Once the inspector had departed, leaving behind a stack of official pamphlets and a lingering sense of dread, John knew he couldn't sit idly by. He had to talk to Mike. As he approached their perfectly manicured lawn, a tight knot of apprehension and resolve formed in his stomach. Linda answered the door, her smile a little too bright, a touch too wide for a casual neighborly chat. "Oh, James," she chirped, her voice saccharine sweet, her eyes wide with a practiced innocence that felt profoundly unnatural. "We know absolutely nothing about any complaint. It's just awful that this is happening to you. I truly, truly hope everything gets resolved." Her words were meant to reassure, but her gaze was restless, flickering away from his, unable to hold eye contact. It was in that precise moment, witnessing her over-the-top performance and the telltale evasiveness in her eyes, that John's vague suspicion morphed into an ironclad certainty. Their feigned innocence was not just transparent, it was a deliberate, almost mocking charade, and it only intensified his burning sense of injustice.
He now knew with a sickening clarity that his neighbors were playing a deceptive, malicious game.
A cold, hard anger began to solidify inside John. The anonymous complaint felt like a cowardly attack, but Linda's shifty eyes and overly sweet demeanor had confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just a bureaucratic inconvenience, it was a deliberate act of malice from his neighbors. The fence, so carefully planned and built, represented a safe space for his children, a sense of security that was now under threat. He wasn't about to simply roll over and concede to their petty spite. This was his home, his family, and he would fight for them. John immediately called code enforcement again. This time, his voice was firm, resolute. He demanded complete access to all zoning regulations for his area, and more importantly, a comprehensive record of every single complaint filed in their neighborhood over the past year. It took several tense days for the voluminous packet of documents to arrive, a thick envelope bursting with permits, diagrams, and legal jargon. John spread them out across his kitchen table, determined to find something, anything, that could help him. He painstakingly flipped through page after page, his eyes scanning for irregularities, for a loophole, for a glimmer of hope. And then his gaze snagged on a single, seemingly innocuous detail, a building permit issued to Mike and Linda Davis 3 years prior for an addition to the rear of the house. John's mind flashed back to the small structure at the back of their property. It looked like a simple screened-in porch, but he remembered noticing how oddly close it seemed to their shared property line. Curiosity, a tiny flicker at first, quickly transformed into a powerful premonition. He pulled out his own property survey and began to meticulously cross-reference the blueprints in the city documents with what he recalled seeing on Mike and Linda's land. Suddenly, it all clicked into place with a jolt that left him breathless. That porch wasn't just a porch. It was, in fact, an enclosed living space, an extension they had clearly built, but it extended a full 5 feet, 1.5 meters, beyond the legally allowed building setback lines. It was a blatant, undeniable zoning violation. The realization hit him like a physical blow, an unexpected twist that completely flipped the script. John's anger, previously a simmering defensive heat, now erupted into a focused, offensive blaze. They had tried to penalize him for a non-existent infraction, while they themselves were living with a glaring, years-long violation. Their true motivation, previously shrouded in false friendliness, became crystal clear. His new, perfectly compliant fence had likely drawn unwelcome attention to their own glaringly illegal structure. This wasn't just about a fence anymore. It was about exposing a monumental hypocrisy. Armed with his damning evidence, John didn't hesitate. He marched straight to code enforcement and filed a meticulously detailed counter-complaint against Mike and Linda. Every blueprint, every photograph he'd unearthed was meticulously attached, leaving no doubt that their porch was in fact an illegal encroachment violating precise setback regulations. A few days later, a familiar city vehicle pulled up to Mike and Linda's house. This time, however, the original inspector wasn't alone. A colleague accompanied him. John watched from his living room window, a quiet sense of anticipation humming inside him. He saw the inspectors methodically pacing the perimeter of his neighbor's property, their clipboards out, meticulously comparing the structure to the very blueprints John had provided. Linda, ever the picture of suburban charm, emerged onto her porch, attempting a strained smile and a wave. But as the inspectors pointed directly at her cozy addition, her face visibly paled. The false cheer vanished, replaced by a look of dawning dread. The following week brought sweet vindication. A formal letter arrived at Mike and Linda's door, an official notice demanding they either demolish their illegal addition or bring it into strict compliance within 30 days. Accompanying this ultimatum was a hefty fine, with additional penalties accruing for every day they delayed.
This wasn't just justice. It was a profound, deeply satisfying sense of schadenfreude. His perfectly legal fence stood unmolested, while their glaringly illegal structure, the very one that had likely motivated their petty complaint against him, was now facing total demolition. John watched, utterly gratified, as Mike and Linda nervously paced their yard in the coming weeks. He saw them arguing, making frantic phone calls, their once impeccable composure crumbling under the weight of their self-inflicted predicament. True to the city's word, a demolition crew eventually arrived. Piece by painful piece, their cozy porch began to disappear, leaving an open, empty space where their illegal addition once stood. It was the most perfect ending. Justice, served with a deliciously ironic twist, had prevailed. Mike and Linda, who tried to disrupt John's peaceful life with their spiteful, baseless accusations, ended up paying a far steeper price for their arrogance and hypocrisy. Now, John's children could play safely behind their perfectly legal fence, and every time he walked past the vacant spot where the unlawful structure had been, a quiet, contented smile touched his lips. This wasn't just a win, it was a complete, deeply satisfying catharsis.